Welcome to Food Talk for Health, because you really are what you eat. Here is your host, Tonia King.
Joining me today on Food Talk for Health is Zen Honeycutt, founding executive director of Moms Across America. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about some pretty important topics regarding things that are in our food that shouldn't be there. Tell me a little bit about Moms Across America, Zen.
Thank you, Tanya. And thank you to all your listeners for tuning in and sharing great podcasts like this. This is the way we get out the truth to the American people and people around the world about what's going on in their food supply. And I'm honored to be able to share. Moms Across America is a national coalition of unstoppable moms. And we've been around for 12 years now as a nonprofit. And our mission is to educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities. And I started Moms Across America because, like millions of parents across the country, I was struggling with my children's health issues. You know, they had asthma, allergies, autoimmune issues. They had even autism symptoms at one point. And that was not the case, Tanya, when you and I were kids, or most of your listeners were kids.
Correct.
You know, we did not know people who were allergic to pepper or mango or dairy or eggs or wheat, right?
Right.
People could eat pretty much everything. And so I was really confused until I saw a TED Talk by Robin O'Brien called Patriotism on a Plate, where she talks about her kid having an allergic reaction and then learning about GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and how they are foreign invaders, basically foreign proteins in your body that your body then perceives as a foreign invader and has inflammation and reactions to them. And then Jeffrey Smith had a movie out at the same time called Genetic Roulette, and a book as well. And so I started to dive into what was going on in the food supply, and I realized, holy cow, this is why my kids have so many reactions to food and why their immune systems are messed up. And so I began to research more and got involved in Prop 37, the GMO labeling initiative, and in California at the time in 2012. And by the end of 2012, I had an idea to join into 4th of July parades to raise awareness with as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. So I did that. I have no background in doing what I'm doing right now. I used to be a former fashion designer and an entrepreneur, but I said, you know what? I'm out to create health and freedom in the world, and I can do something about it. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to do something about it. So I started Moms Across America, and our first initiative was to join in to 4th of July parades with banners that said Moms Across America March to Label GMOs, and just raise awareness about GMOs and have people, look them up. And we did that with 179 groups across the country joined in 37 states.
Wow.
And yeah, within 5 years, there were 600 leaders across the country that created over 1,000 events in all 50 states. And I have since then published a book in both US and Japan. I've toured 9 cities in Japan. Japan is very important for the US food supply because they're such big purchasers of our grain. And we've gotten Costco to stop selling Roundup. And we have initiated the first glyphosate testing in America, which has subsequently sparked glyphosate testing in countries around the world. And I'm sure we'll get into GMOs, glyphosate, and all of that stuff.
My goodness, Zen. I mean, the power of women, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Women make 90% of household purchasing choices. Moms buy 85% of the food. People trust moms. I asked legislators before we joined into 4th of July parades, like, would that even matter? Do legislators even care about, what we're doing in our hometown parades? And he said, oh, yeah. Legislators are more afraid of moms than any other grassroots group out there.
I think it's very exciting and just very rewarding to how you can really help so many kids, and not even just kids, adults, people in general. We don't realize how many bad things are in our food supply.
It's really challenging because the government doesn't tell you, and subsequently we end up feeling very betrayed by our government. I know I did. I was very, very sad when I found out that genetically modified organisms were being allowed in our food supply without being labeled since the late 90s. For instance, they were genetically modifying potatoes with a certain kind of fish in order to prevent them from, like being affected by frost. And I thought, wait a second, they're putting fish genes in tomatoes without telling us?
Yeah, that's crazy.
How can they get away with that? And then, since then, they've developed three kinds of GMOs. Can I explain what those are? Just in case you.
Absolutely. Sure.
So yeah, there's three kinds of GMOs, and the one that I just talked about is more of a desired trait type of GMO, where they genetically engineer it with an animal, and that is just one type of the GMOs. It's a desired trait. They since have developed CRISPR, gene editing. They have salmon that grows 4 times fatter, 4 times faster, and they're sterile because they're genetically modified with a type of fish eel. It's like part fish, part eel. I'm not interested in feeding that to my kids. Potatoes that don't brown, but they do still rot. You just don't see them browning, right? You don't see the brown spots. That browning is masked. The same with Arctic apples. They don't brown. So they can still be going spoiled. You just don't see it. More vitamin A and rice, like those are desired trait type of GMOs, which sound pretty innocuous because it does involve herbicides or pesticides. But the problem with these is that they have shown from preliminary testing and many tests that these types of GMOs cause thousands of off-target mutations, unintended, uncontrollable consequences within the body of the organism. If you think about it, you can't just like the body is not like you can take a line of red Legos and take one out and put in a green Lego and expect everything to stay orderly. The body's not like that. We're more like a body of water, like a pond, where if you were to put in a cup of oil, it would just get all over inside the pond and things would change and things would die. And you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We're holistic beings. You can't just impact one set of RNA or DNA and expect nothing else to change. The body kind of like scars up, there's a reaction to that change. So that type of GMO is called desired trait. I call it desired trait. It's also known as gene edited, CRISPR, things like that. But the original GMOs were really more like Bt toxin GMOs. That's Bacteria thuringiensis. It's a bacteria taken from the carcass of a dead grain caterpillar.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, it doesn't sound very appetizing, does it?
No.
Yeah, and they genetically engineer it to constantly reproduce more toxins. So it becomes a little toxin factory. And the corn, for instance, that is genetically modified as a Bt GMO, will have that toxin factory in every cell of the plant, whether it's the root, the stalk, the corn, the leaves. And so when a little corn rootworm comes along and eats that plant, it ingests the toxin factory. Its stomach then becomes a toxin factory. The stomach explodes, little holes are perforated in the stomach lining. The toxin gets out into its body and then it dies. So the plant is actually a built-in pesticide, right? It has a built-in pesticide. And those little holes in the stomach that are made in the corn rootworm sound suspiciously like leaky gut, which is happening to millions of Americans today. My children's doctor said that pretty much every child has some form of leaky gut. My kids were just lucky to have a mom that would find out about it, and so we could take actions to heal their guts. But that leaky gut leads to the 400% increase in food allergies that have happened since GMOs have been introduced. So that's going to be in corn tortillas, corn chips, corn syrup solids, and corn syrup products are in about 75% of America's packaged foods, like processed foods.
Oh, yeah. High fructose corn syrup is in
Yeah.
everything, it seems.
Yes.
Thing is, back when you were wondering why your kids were not feeling well,
Right.
it wasn't just sugar. A lot of times parents might think, oh, too much sugar. Kids are just overloaded with sugar, but it goes a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, the corn syrup, there's soy, there's GMO corn, soy, canola, unfortunately alfalfa, that's what the animals eat. There's GMO yellow squash and zucchini, some zucchini, and papaya, pink pineapple, apples. There's some CRISPR GMO mushrooms, large quantity of GMOs right now. And the majority of the GMOs are what are called HT, herbicide tolerant GMOs. This is the third type of GMO. They're often known as RR or Roundup Ready GMOs. They're genetically engineered to withstand glyphosate, otherwise known as Roundup. It's one of the ingredients in Roundup. And Roundup is the weed killer that a lot of people spray in their backyards. They saw commercials since the late 70s or 80s, I believe, spraying Roundup on your sidewalk and your patios. And that type of GMO is genetically engineered to withstand the spraying of Roundup, Ranger Pro, or glyphosate-based herbicides directly on the crop. So the corn or the soy or the wheat or the sugar beets will not die, but all of the weeds around it. It will kill everything around it, including the earthworms and the organic matter in the soil. And this is a problem because even though the crop is Roundup Ready and it's very easy for the farmer initially until the weeds develop a resistance to it, right?
Right.
We're not Roundup Ready. So the crop is sprayed. I mean, the entire crop is sprayed and those residues stay on the crop. They don't wash, dry, or cook off. And we consume that the Roundup residues in that crop, about 80% of what's sprayed stays on the crop, and then we consume it. And when we consume it, there's a lot of problems that happen with that, Tanya, because glyphosate is number one, it was discovered as a chelator, meaning it was a pipe cleaner. It cleaned out pipes, grabbed onto the metals in the pipes. And what that does in the human body or in the plant is it grabs onto and makes unavailable the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches. So it essentially, according to Dr. Don Huber, who's a 60-year plant pathologist, it essentially gives the plant AIDS, weakens its immune system. And then the normally harmless bacteria in the soil can kill that plant. So we have plants and now humans walking around with very weakened immune systems.
And we wonder why. Hearing this, it's so frustrating to think that this can be allowed even anywhere near our food supply.
It's enraging. What are they doing on the Hill with our taxpayer dollars? How can they sleep at night knowing that they're spraying a chelator on the food supply that's weakening our immune systems, basically giving people AIDS, the same type of status where your immune system is weakened. And then wonder why we have 54% of our children with a chronic illness in America, of something about 50 to 64% of Americans that have some type of illness, and it's ridiculous. It's also a carcinogen. I mean, we know now 1 out of 2 men and 1 out of 3 females are expected to get cancer in America today. That's completely unacceptable. It causes liver and kidney disease. And we've got 1 out of 4 people in America now with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, some form of liver disease. This is terrible news. This can lead to autism because of the toxins. If your liver is not functioning properly, the toxins build up and it can lead to autism symptoms and Alzheimer's and all of that. Oh, and an endocrine disruptor, cause miscarriages, sperm damage. It can androgenize baby girls. It can mess with your hormone system, meaning if you don't have proper levels of serotonin and melatonin, things like that, you're going to have addictions. You're not going to sleep well. You're going to be at increased chance of having bipolar and other types of, schizophrenia and mental health issues, and increased risk of violence because your brain is not functioning properly. Your gut is all messed up and your brain's not functioning properly. So the way glyphosate functions, when people understand how it functions, it also causes nervous system damage and neurotoxicity. So when you understand how glyphosate is used, how it functions, right, as a chelator, an endocrine disruptor, a carcinogen, a neurotoxin, and a nervous system damage and causes liver and kidney disease, you understand why Dr. Don Huber says that glyphosate makes DDT look like mouthwash.
Oh, my goodness.
One of the biggest threats to humanity and to the planet that we have ever encountered. And we're using it to the tune of about 280 million pounds a year on our food supply alone in America today.
I'm talking with Zen Honeycutt, Executive Director of Moms Across America, a pretty powerful organization trying to get the word out about all of these ingredients that should be nowhere near our food supply. Now, I want to talk about some of the gluten-free products that you discovered had some pretty horrible things in them. You guys have been doing a lot of testing from a variety of different products, right?
Yes, we have. And we initiated this testing because back when I first, initiated this movement to find out about what's going on in our food supply, get GMOs labeled, get glyphosate out of our food supply, I watched a panel that was on the Heritage Foundation, and there was a woman on that panel that said, our biggest problem, and this is for the GMO proponents, right? They promote GMOs. She said, our biggest problem is these mom bloggers that are saying that their kids are getting off GMOs, eating organic, and they're getting better. And these moms are perpetrating fraud on the American people. They don't have any evidence. And she was talking about me, as I was one of the only people as a mom doing that, because other groups had previously only talked about glyphosate and its impact on butterflies and birds and insects and things like that. So I really focused on the food supply. And so when she said that they have no evidence, I said, ding, we have to get evidence. We have to show that glyphosate in our children is, connected to their health issues. So I looked at labs, and I bugged a farmer friend of mine who knew lab owners. And finally, after several months, got a lab to test for glyphosate. And we tested for it was the first initiative in America. And we tested for glyphosate in tap water, urine, and breast milk. And when we found glyphosate in breast milk, 3,000 times higher than has been shown to cause sex hormone changes and liver and kidney damage, organ damage, it made international news. And other countries did the right thing, like France and Germany. They stopped allowing glyphosate, or at least the farmers stopped spraying glyphosate as a drying agent. And it didn't become official till just recently that many countries in Europe don't allow it. 60 countries now around the world do not allow glyphosate either as a drying agent, or they have restrictions on the use, or they've outright banned it. But the United States is lagging behind, and this is because of the corporate corruption that's going on within our political system. So we initiated the glyphosate testing that then sparked all kinds of other testing, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Detox Project, GMO for USA, Food Democracy Now, like a whole bunch of different other organizations tested for glyphosate as well. And since then, glyphosate has been tested in beer and wine and orange juice and dairy. Other organizations have found it in tampons and sanitary pads, and even the gauze used at hospitals. We found it in, pretty much everything out there that we tested. I mean, it's almost in 100% of chickpeas and oats that were tested, even organic in some small amounts. But conventional levels are thousands of times higher than what's been found in organic and foods. So we recently tested in the past few years, school lunches, fast foods, Trix loaded cereal, which is of course loaded with, heavy metals and pesticides and glyphosate. And most recently baby formula and gluten-free foods. And we did the baby formula in conjunction with gmoscience.org and the New MDs, which is a show that I'm on. But the gluten-free is our most recent, and we were horrified by the results. 44 out of 46 of the samples were positive for glyphosate. And this is especially concerning because the people who eat gluten-free usually have celiacs. And the rise of celiacs has been almost exactly correlate with the rise of glyphosate use on the food supply. If you think about what glyphosate does and how it impacts gut bacteria and the problems it can cause in the gut, there are many people like Dr. Zach Bush, who is triple board certified, who says that people who have a gluten intolerance are actually not allergic, quote unquote, to gluten. Their body is simply reacting to glyphosate. So when people eat gluten-free and their bodies are reacting to glyphosate, and then they're eating gluten-free with glyphosate in it, that's a problem. That's perpetuating the problem. It's making their gut issues worse. Organic does matter because glyphosate is not allowed to be sprayed on organic, and GMOs are not in organic. So we always recommend eating organic. If you can find regenerative organic, even better, because regenerative organic is more conscious about building organic soil matter and is better for, the farmland and the environment and everything. We did see that the organic and gluten-free samples, some of them had no detectable levels of glyphosate, some had low levels, but we had hoped that all of the organic and gluten-free samples of gluten-free food would be negative, not detectable for glyphosate, but that wasn't the case. Some of the organic samples were still contaminated. Now, across the board, what we have seen is that the organic levels have been much lower than conventional. For instance, when wine was tested, I believe it was about 0.3 parts per billion of glyphosate was found, in organic wine, but conventional wine was 54 parts per billion. You know what I mean? Much higher levels.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's the same with, any type of chickpea product or oat product or wheat product. The levels might be maybe 3 parts per billion of glyphosate, but in the conventional product, it could be 100 or 900 or, something like that. Unfortunately, what we found in the gluten-free chickpea pasta by Banza was the highest level that of glyphosate that the lab that we used had ever found in any type of human food.
That's astounding. I just
Yeah.
can't believe that.
2,876 parts per billion in this chickpea pasta. Now, what's happening here, Tanya, is that chickpeas are often a cover crop. They're used in between growing corn or soy or, other types of crops. And then what the farmer does is they don't want that crop to sort of take over. So they spray it with glyphosate as a drying agent before they harvest it. It's also used as a drying agent before harvest so that the farmer can harvest it more quickly. And what's happening is that those glyphosate levels are collecting on the chickpeas and they end up in our food. This is a huge problem. And that level is actually, a toxic level. It exceeds the European standards, what they allow, and absolutely should not be allowed in the food supply. High levels of pesticides as well. We didn't test this batch for heavy metals, unfortunately, but we did test for minerals, and the levels of minerals were so low. We also found gluten in these gluten-free samples. 7 of the samples had levels of gluten that were very concerning.
Sounds like labeling is the real problem. It sounds like moms across America may be really trying to get somebody to pay attention to labels, right?
Well, the problem is that these things are not required to even be on the label. The problem is that the FDA classified GMOs and the application of pesticides as both of them as a process and not an additive. If they had classified GMOs as an additive to the food supply, like salt or sugar, it would have to be on the label. And it would have to be safety tested to be sure that it's safe. But instead, they gave these corporations these types of GMOs and pesticides were not actually an additive. They were a process. So that was a giant loophole. So then the GMO manufacturers and the pesticide manufacturers were like, oh, we don't have to worry about the residues because it doesn't have to be written on the label, even though you can test for GMOs and find them in the food. You can test for pesticides and find them in the food. They are actually an additive, right? They end up in the food and you eat them. So they decided, the FDA decided to give the corporations a loophole and not have to require that. So you can pick up any product in the grocery store today, and it could have 2,000 parts per billion of glyphosate in it, or more even possibly. And you will not be informed, not given that choice to choose whether or not to consume toxic pesticides because it's not required to be on the label. So I believe it's not just a labeling problem. It is an EPA regulatory agency problem and a corruption problem within our political system. These corporations are allowed to donate money to our senators and our representatives. They pay fees to the EPA and the FDA. So about 1/3 of the income to these regulatory agencies comes from the corporations. And these corporations basically dictate policy. They tell the regulatory agencies what levels of pesticides or herbicides would be found in the food. So what the limits should be. They tell them what the limits should be. There's memos proving this. Hey, you've got to raise your level of glyphosate.
Wow.
Global residue levels by 300%, essentially, is what they ended up being, going from I believe 2 to 13 parts per million on corn back in 2013. There's documentation of Monsanto sending memos to the Japanese government, to the US government, telling them how they should raise their allowable levels of residues of glyphosate and other pesticides because they're finding higher levels. They're giving hey, heads up, you got to raise your levels because, otherwise what the farmers are doing is considered illegal and they won't be able to sell their crops and, boo-hoo.
Right. It's a whole chain reaction, right?
Yeah. That the farmers will go bankrupt and, and we can't have that. Of course we can't have that. But how about they change their practices?
Exactly. Seems like it's hard to avoid the contamination.
It is challenging. I do need to clarify that organic is always the better option because there are lower levels, but you can't expect that it would always be completely 100% devoid of these harmful pesticides, glyphosate and other harmful pesticides, because glyphosate and other chemicals have been found in the rain, in the irrigation water, in the soil, in the air, umbilical cords, and, breast milk and all of that, baby formula that we tested. So the thing that we need to do then is to transform the food supply so that anybody who buys any food, whether they can afford organic or not, is not being poisoned. We need access to safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food. That should be priority number one in America, because everybody needs food, everybody needs water, right? When you do that, that improves the outcome in all of the other areas that we are facing in America today. So if you change the food and you stop feeding everybody neurotoxins, things that destroy their gut bacteria and basically have people incapable of making, good decisions, then you affect the entire society.
Zen, what is Moms Across America recommending for folks to do?
Thank you so much for asking. It is so important that number one, you feed your family organic as much as possible. And number two, you start rallying your friends and family members around you to do the same, so that when your kids go to your friend's house, you know that they are also eating organic, and your grandparents' house and mother-in-law and father-in-law, all that stuff. Start educating people about eating organic as much as possible. Send them to our website. Send them my book. It's called Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and a Celebration of Community. And it's on Amazon. I have a short film on YouTube called Communities Rising. It's free and it's about 45 minutes. It's very insightful. There's a new movie out called Common Ground, and also a new movie I'm just starting to watch now. I'm about halfway through. It's called Organic Rising. And these are the types of movies that really educate people about what's going on in the food supply. There's also Secret Ingredient by Jeffrey Smith. There's a movie called Modified. There's GMO OMG. There's Bought. And then contact your senators and your representatives and tell them that we need a safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food supply, and tell them that they have to, first of all, stop allowing glyphosate as a drying agent. That's where we're consuming the most glyphosate, and make sure that you are, avoiding grains that are not organic as much as possible, like oats and wheats and peas and barley, legumes, things like that. Any type of dried grain, bean, or legume product, that's where you're consuming the most glyphosate if it's not organic.
I was surprised to read that you found so many different pesticides in things like flour and crackers,
Yes.
brownie mix.
It's so unfortunate to see that this is the way our food supply, the direction that we've gone in. We're at a turning point right now. We're at the beginning of the end of this chemical era, and we are going to turn this around, because there's so many people that are sick and so many people that are being affected by these chemicals with cancer and heart disease and all types of chronic illnesses. I think we're at a turning point, Tanya, and I think that people are going to share this information and say, hey, this is why I've been talking about eating organic for such a long time, or this is why, mother-in-law, it's so important to me when my kids go stay over at your house that you buy organic. Like, I really need you to do this now. It's really important, because, you can't put fuel on a campfire and expect it to go out. You have to stop putting fuel, even a teaspoon. You have to stop putting the fuel on the campfire. You have to go 100% organic, cold turkey, as much as humanly possible. Like, you just don't know sometimes if something's going to be contaminated. And we have to do daily detox practices, things like sweating, things like having bentonite clay and activated charcoal, things like saunas, and eating organic food, and other kinds of detox, things with chelators, binders that will pull the toxins out of your body. We have to be detoxing on a regular basis, because we are being exposed to so many chemicals in our food, our homes, and our environment.
Zen, where can we go online for more details?
You can go to momsacrossamerica.org or .com, both of them. And please do click on Connect and sign up for our email newsletter, so that you get the calls to action. You get invited to our Monday night Moms Connect calls. We have calls on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern time. You get to interact with me and with other moms, and there's dads, there's mothers and others that come on the calls. We often have scientists, doctors, lawyers, health practitioners, people with products that are great health solutions that can support you in the meantime until you do recover, and hopefully don't have to use any supplements at all. But in the meantime, you might need something to support you to recover. So we have all kinds of information, and it's a discussion. It's not a show. So you can, ask questions and interact with us. And please do get to know your senators, representatives, at least, the aides in the offices. Contact them, email them, tell them about the information that you find on our website and what they need to do about it to take action to protect the health and safety of Americans.
I'm talking with Zen Honeycutt, Executive Director of Moms Across America. Thank you so much for what you do. It's just so powerful, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Tanya. It's my pleasure. Please do go to our website, everybody. everybody and check out the food result tests from other groups of, categories of foods that we've tested. And if you would like to see more testing, please do donate. Anything from $3 to $10 to $20 a month would make a huge difference in our ability to test further.
Thank you, Zen.
Thank you, Tanya.
You've been listening to Food Talk for Health with Tonya King. Thanks for joining us. Eat well to be well.
Hope you'll check out our podcast for Food Talk for Health and subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts from.